Will we ever see Jon Jones versus Alex? Yeah.
Possibility. I mean, Rogan is pushing me right now to try to make that fight. It's just, guys, Jon Jones is a whole nother. I consider Jon Jones the greatest combat fighter of all time. Jon Jones is the nastiest dude ever in the history. And Jon's got a dark side to him, man. He shoots guns. Jon Jones is a killer.
The big money fight is Alex
At
and
the White
Jon
House,
Jones
right?
at the White House.
Yeah.
Are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah.
Catch weight. Make
Yeah.
it 225. You don't have to be for a title. Make it the bad month upper edition. You know?
The moment that Freedom 250 card dropped, the entire MMA world went absolutely nuclear, but not in the way Dana White expected. Within seconds of the announcement, thousands of hardcore fans were asking the exact same question that was burning through every forum, every comment section, every group chat across the planet. Where the hell is Jon Jones versus Alex Pereira? The most anticipated super fight in heavyweight history, completely missing from what's supposed to be the most prestigious card ever held. And let me tell you something, this isn't just about one missing fight. This is about a pattern of decisions that's got the entire MMA community ready to revolt against the UFC brass.
Against Alex Pereira? No, shut the fuck up. Jon Jones, Alex Pereira fight will probably be the biggest fight in human history. You got the greatest of all time in Jon Jones, and arguably the most destructive striker that's ever competed.
Yeah.
No one's like that guy. Peloton?
Why not fight against Pereira, a guy who's the same age as you, and we walk around the same exact size? Right now, I had to eat a big breakfast because I'm getting underneath 235. Pereira walks around at like 240, and he has magnificent accolades. Business-wise, it makes more sense. Fight the, I'm gonna call him this, fight the nobody that may be more dangerous, or fight the guy with all the accolades who's incredibly dangerous, but it actually will affect your legacy. Where when you look back and it's like, Jon just beat Alex Pereira, it's bigger. It's just much bigger. And anybody who can't understand that logic simply doesn't want to.
All right, Sunday morning, leaving Las Vegas. Freedom 250 was announced last night at the White House, going down in June. So we're going to talk about this. I honestly thought we were going to see Jon Jones versus Alex Pereira, more than likely in the main event. Of course, that's not the main event. That is Justin Gaethje taking on Ilia Topuria for the undisputed lightweight championship of the world, which is a great fight, which is the fight that should happen because obviously meritocracy, and they've got an interim champion. There was people saying that maybe Charles Oliveira.
Here's what makes this exclusion absolutely mind-blowing. Think about the setup we had here. Alex Pereira, the most violent striker in the sport, had just made this historic move up to heavyweight after vacating his light heavyweight belt. Jon Jones, the lineal heavyweight champion and arguably the greatest fighter who ever lived, sitting right there waiting for the biggest payday of his career. The White House as the venue, screaming prestige and American combat sports excellence. You literally could not have asked for a more perfect storm of circumstances to create the fight of the century. But instead of capitalizing on this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, we get crickets. And fans are absolutely losing their minds over what feels like the biggest missed opportunity in UFC history.
Max Holloway didn't put him to sleep per se, but certainly a TKO. So that wouldn't have made sense anyway. Now, I did think Jon Jones, the greatest of all time, according to a lot of people, and yeah, probably is. Obviously, many asterisks to his name. I thought he'd be fighting Alex Pereira, because Alex Pereira vacated the belt. Yuri versus Carlos Ulberg is going down in Miami. That's a great fight. I'm very happy for Yuri Prochazka.
But here's where things get really interesting, and this is what nobody's talking about. While everyone's losing their *T over the Jones-Pereira exclusion, there might actually be some method to Dana White's apparent madness. The card we're getting instead features Alex Pereira going for a third division title against Cyril Gane, which is genuinely unprecedented in modern MMA. We're talking about a guy who could become a three-division champion, something that's rarer than winning the lottery. And from a pure entertainment standpoint, this matchup might actually deliver more fireworks than the super fight everyone's demanding. Because here's the brutal truth that hardcore fans don't want to admit. A Jones-Pereira fight would probably end with Jones taking Pereira down in the first round and grinding out a dominant wrestling performance that leaves casual fans checking their phones.
fighting for the interim strap against Alex Pereira, which is very impressive because Alex Pereira will be the first person to ever compete for 3 different titles, 3 different weight classes, which is just, it is insane. I mean, the success that this guy's had is phenomenal. And we're going to talk about this matchup. So Cyril Gane versus Gane, pardon me. Cyril Gane versus, oh, I've got to adjust my contact lens because sometimes everything goes a bit blurry and I can't see shit. There we go. Yeah, so Cyril Gane versus Alex Pereira, 2 great strikers. And I'll say this, it's a better fight than Jon Jones versus Alex.
Now listen to this part, because it completely changes how you should view this situation. Jon Jones' wrestling is so devastatingly effective that he ragdolled Cyril Gane, a fighter that even Tom Aspinall couldn't take down or control. Gane is this incredibly athletic, mobile heavyweight with elite takedown defense, and Jones made him look like an amateur on the ground. So what do you think happens when Jones gets his hands on Pereira, a striker who's still developing his ground game? It's lights out, probably inside 5 minutes, and we're all left wondering why we paid $60 to watch a grappling clinic instead of the striking war we imagined. Meanwhile, Gane versus Pereira is basically guaranteed to be a kickboxing match with 4-ounce gloves, where both guys have the power to end it with a single shot. Every exchange is potentially fight-ending, and there's 0 chance of this turning into a boring wrestling match.
Explain why, right? Of course, magnitude, star power, legendary names, resumes. Yeah, that's what Jon Jones brings. Also what Alex Pereira brings, to be fair. But I've said this a million times, so this won't be a shock. There would have been a really good chance that Jon Jones would have just taken down Alex Pereira. Pardon me, it's early. I've only had a few hours sleep. But yeah, Jones would have probably taken down Pereira. Wouldn't have been easy, right? Magomed Ankalaev has tried to do that. Other people have tried to do that. Jan Blachowicz tried to do that. But this is Jon Jones we're talking.
But wait, it gets even more complicated than just stylistic matchmaking. The Tom Aspinall situation is absolutely crucial to understanding why this card looks the way it does. Here's a guy who won the interim heavyweight title, defended it successfully, and should have gotten an automatic shot at the undisputed belt. But instead, he's been sitting on the sidelines while Jon Jones played games with negotiations and chased money fights that never materialized. This created a domino effect throughout the entire heavyweight division, with legitimate contenders getting pushed aside while the champion cherry-picked his opponents. And now we're dealing with the fallout from months of political maneuvering that's left the division in absolute chaos.
And Tom Aspinall couldn't take down Cyril Gane, but Jon could, right? So that's just something to think about. Jon would have probably taken Pereira down and finished him by a ground and pound, you know, just choked him out, whatever, and it could have been a quick performance. Now, the matchup we have now for the interim heavyweight strap, Pereira versus Cyril Gane, this is completely different.
Here's the kicker that explains everything. Jon Jones has a documented history of stalling negotiations and avoiding certain fights when the terms don't suit him perfectly. Remember when he was supposed to fight Stipe Miocic? That got delayed multiple times because of contract disputes and Jones' demands for specific financial arrangements. The pattern is crystal clear. When Jones doesn't want to fight or can't get the deal he wants, he simply disappears from the conversation until things align with his preferences. So this exclusion from the White House card isn't necessarily Dana White being stubborn or missing an obvious money fight. It's Jones once again controlling his own narrative and timeline, regardless of what fans want to see.
It's going to be a kickboxing match in 4-ounce gloves. And then when you look at the matchup, on one side you've got Pereira, who's got insane power, who was the middleweight champion, the light heavyweight champion, and now potentially heavyweight champion. Again, legendary stuff. The power will travel. He had knockout power at 185, 205 he will, and at heavyweight he's still going to pack the same amount of punch. Granted, you're fighting bigger people, you're striking bigger people with bigger necks and bigger jaws and just generally heavy, so they'll be able to absorb the blows better, but he's still going to crack a punch, man. Simple.
And get this, the business side of this sport is way more complicated than fans realize. Tom Aspinall's manager, Eddie Hearn, has been pushing for specific contractual terms that might be stalling potential matchups. When you've got fighters' representatives demanding certain purse guarantees, pay-per-view points, and contract modifications, it can completely derail even the most obvious fights. This isn't just about two guys agreeing to punch each other in the face. It's about multi-million-dollar negotiations involving multiple parties who all want their piece of the pie. Sometimes the most anticipated fights don't happen not because promoters are stupid, but because the financial demands become impossible to reconcile within a reasonable time frame.
As slick as Cyril Gane, although I'm not saying he's not slick, I'm not saying he's not smooth, I'm not saying he hasn't got great combinations, because he does. He's a brilliant world-class kickboxer. But on the other side, you've got Cyril Gane, who's very, very light on the feet, very bouncy, very floaty. He kind of glides around the octagon and extremely fast for the heavyweight division. I don't think either guy is going to go for a takedown. If it does go down to the ground, it'll be after one of them gets knocked down. Shut up with the announcements, please. I'm trying to do a YouTube video like an absolute bellend walking through an airport and everyone's looking. It's full of UFC fans because UFC 326.
Hold up, did you catch what just happened with the Conor McGregor situation? McGregor himself explained why he doesn't need to be on this specific card, and his reasoning is actually brilliant. His star power is so massive that he can headline any random card on any weekend and turn it into an instant blockbuster. He doesn't need the White House prestige to sell pay-per-views. This reveals something important about how the UFC deploys its biggest assets. Instead of stacking every major name on one card, they spread the star power across multiple events to maximize overall revenue. It's strategic business planning, not hatred of super fights.
Yeah, if it goes to the ground, it's because one of them knocks each other down and then they go to finish it. So this is going to be a fantastic striking affair in the co-main event at the White House at Freedom 250. Right, so give me your thoughts on that one. Who do you think wins this fight? It seems like I'm always going against Alex Pereira, but I kind of think it might be Cyril Gane. I think Cyril Gane might get it, right? But regardless, whether it's Cyril or it's Alex, whoever wins this will be the interim heavyweight champion of the world. And this is a crazy situation for Tom Aspinall because...
Now here's where it gets absolutely wild, and this changes everything we've been discussing. Jon Jones isn't just playing contract games or being difficult about negotiations. The man is dealing with serious health issues that nobody's talking about. We're talking hip surgery, arthritis diagnosis, and the kind of physical breakdown that ends careers. When Dana White himself confirms that a fighter is dealing with legitimate medical concerns, it completely shifts the narrative from strategic exclusion to medical necessity. This isn't about money or politics anymore. This is about a legendary fighter's body finally catching up with decades of elite-level competition and punishment.
Was the interim champion and couldn't get a shot at the undisputed. Hello, she's looking at me with a smirk. Couldn't get a shot at the undisputed with Jon Jones because he wasn't playing games. He had a fight booked against Stipe Miocic, but then Jones certainly was playing games. You know, after the Curtis Blades matchup, we didn't know what he was doing. Now we don't know what's happening with Tom, right? I assume their eyes are going to be good to go very, very soon, right? Otherwise, Eddie Hearn isn't going to sign a fighter that can't fight, right? So I'm assuming any day now they're going to come out, start negotiating with the UFC and say, listen, he's good to go. He's fine. He's healed. He's ready.
But there's something way bigger happening behind the scenes that explains this entire situation. The UFC is essentially managing the end of Jon Jones' career while trying to maintain the illusion that he's still an active, viable heavyweight champion. They can't openly admit that their champion might be physically done because it would devalue the entire division and create massive promotional headaches. So instead, we get vague references to contract negotiations and strategic matchmaking decisions, while the real issue, Jones' declining health, stays buried in medical reports that fans never see. It's a delicate balancing act between protecting a legend's legacy and acknowledging the brutal reality of combat sports.
So a rematch with Cyril Gane would have been the immediate matchup, but if he beats Alex Pereira, it certainly will be the immediate matchup. But this time it'll be for an interim belt versus an undisputed belt, which makes the fight even bigger. As I said on another video the other day, it all depends on these contractual negotiations. Eddie Hearn came out and was kind of shitting on Tom's contract and saying that he doesn't get paid what he should get paid. If Eddie's going to try and change that contract, and you know, that is what a good manager does, to be fair, and you want the best management team on your side. You certainly don't want an amateur, you don't want a chump, you don't want someone that doesn't know what they're doing. But if he tries to push the goalposts far too...
So there you have it. What looked like Dana White deliberately excluding the biggest super fight in heavyweight history is actually a complex web of medical issues, contract disputes, and strategic business decisions that go way beyond simple matchmaking. Jon Jones' health problems, combined with his history of difficult negotiations, and the UFC's need to protect multiple business interests simultaneously, created the perfect storm for disappointment. And honestly, this might be exactly how Jones' legendary career ends, not with a bang in the White House, but with a whimper in a doctor's office. So here's my question for you, drop it in the comments. Do you think Jones ever fights again, or are we watching the most anticlimactic end to a GOAT's career in MMA history? If this breakdown helped you understand what's really happening behind the scenes, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell because the heavyweight division is about to get even more chaotic. I'll see you in the next one.
I'm going to agree to that, and there might be some kind of stalling, and we might have Tom Aspinall sitting on the sidelines for a while. I hope that doesn't happen, and I hope if he is able to renegotiate, I hope he gets a killer deal, because he deserves it, right? Tom's a freak of nature, he's an incredible athlete, but he's got to come back, and it looks like he's going to be fighting Alex Pereira or Cyril Gane.
And should he win the fight, then we figure out what's going on with Tom Aspinall, and it could be him versus Aspinall.
Now, other fights on the card. Steve Garcia versus Diego Lopez. I forgot to mention that one on my 326 preview yesterday. That's an insane fight, of course.
And speaking of chaotic, let me blow your mind with what's actually happening right now that nobody's connecting the dots on. While everyone's obsessing over Jon Jones' potential retirement, Alex Pereira is quietly orchestrating the most insane career trajectory in modern combat sports history. This dude went from being a relatively unknown kickboxer to potentially becoming the most feared striker in 3 different UFC divisions in less than 3 years. Think about that timeline for a second. Most fighters spend their entire careers trying to become elite in one weight class, and Pereira is out here collecting championship belts like they're Pokemon cards.
Jean Silva, and what else did he do? Oh, I mean, listen, he's just must-see TV. And then on the other side, Steve Garcia hasn't got the same kind of brand value as Diego Lopez, but holy shit, man, he's on, I think, an 8-fight win streak, and they're all stoppages, most of them in the first round. I think one of them got to the second round, and you gotta love Steve Garcia. He's a nasty guy. So that'll be the first fight on the card. I didn't see this one coming. Bo Nickel versus Kyle Dorcas. I didn't expect that one, but it'll be a good fight. Dorcas, he's on a 2-fight win streak. Bo Nickel, of course.
But here's the part that's absolutely terrifying for every heavyweight on the roster. Pereira's power doesn't diminish when he moves up in weight, it actually gets more dangerous. At middleweight, he was knocking people unconscious with technique and precision. At light heavyweight, he was turning off fighters' lights with single shots that looked almost casual. Now at heavyweight, where he doesn't have to cut as much weight and can maintain more of his natural strength, we're talking about a level of knockout power that could legitimately end careers. Cyril Gane has never been dropped in his UFC career, but I guarantee you he's never faced anyone who hits like Alex Pereira at full strength.
Chandler. How about this for Michael Chandler? Fair play, right? Obviously there was talk of Conor McGregor and Michael Chandler competing on that card. Dana said, nah, we ain't interested in that anymore. But it turns out it was the Conor McGregor side. Now, Conor came out and he was doing an interview with Chael Sonnen, and he brought up some good points. He said, listen, it's going to be a sellout with my name involved. Regardless, it's going to do blockbuster numbers.
You know, like a double sale thing. That's the White House is going to hit no matter what.
And he's absolutely right. When Conor comes back, it's going to be insane, right? And that's just the facts of the matter. So they don't need to put him on the White House card. And he said, they don't put me on 300, they'll put me on 301.
Here's what makes this even more mind-blowing. The heavyweight division has been dominated by wrestlers and grapplers for the better part of a decade. We've got guys like Jon Jones, Stipe Miocic, and Curtis Blades who built their games around taking people down and controlling them on the ground. But Pereira represents something completely different, a pure striker who's so dangerous on the feet that attempting takedowns becomes a legitimate risk because of how much damage you might absorb during the process. This could fundamentally change how heavyweight fights are approached strategically.
That'll be it. We'll never see him again. If it is, it's kind of an unceremonious way to go out. I remember when I retired, I wasn't happy with the way that it ended because I wanted to retire in the octagon after a fight, win or lose. I wanted to thank the crowd. That's why I was going to take one more fight. I was actually in negotiations to fight Rashad Evans at the O2 Arena in London because I romanticised this idea of thanking the crowd and all this type of stuff and putting the gloves down and going through that whole thing. And my manager, Audie Atara, was like, Mike, you're romanticising this in your mind for this big moment, but what you're doing is you're putting your...
And get this, the timing of Pereira's heavyweight move couldn't be more perfect from a business standpoint. With Jon Jones potentially on his way out due to health issues and Tom Aspinall stuck in interim champion limbo, the division desperately needs a new face that can generate mainstream excitement. Pereira brings that explosive finishing ability that creates highlight reels and gets casual fans invested. Every single one of his fights has the potential to end in spectacular fashion, which is exactly what the UFC needs to maintain heavyweight relevance in the post-Jones era.
Because obviously I had one eye and I was starting to have problems with the one eye. That's why I've got to adjust my contact lenses because I'm going bloody blind. And he was absolutely right. And for Jon Jones to go out like this after all these negotiations, these back and forths, and just kind of embroiled in what he is, like, it is a bit of a shame. Also a shame that apparently he needs hip surgery. He was talking about, being riddled with arthritis, got caught on camera. Dana mentioned that again at the press conference.
Is it fair to say then Jon Jones is retired and this is the end of his...
But wait, there's something way more significant happening that changes everything about how we should view this White House card. The UFC is essentially using this event to crown the next generation of superstars, while the old guard deals with their various issues. It's not just about Pereira potentially winning a third belt. It's about establishing new storylines and new faces that can carry the promotion forward. This is strategic succession planning disguised as a regular fight card. They're betting that fans will get so caught up in the historic nature of what Pereira might accomplish that they'll forget about the super fights that didn't happen. Now here's where the business gets really interesting, and this explains so much about why certain fights happen and others don't. The UFC has learned from boxing's mistakes with aging superstars who price themselves out of meaningful competition. When fighters start demanding astronomical purses for fights that might not deliver on entertainment value, promoters have to make difficult decisions about resource allocation. Jon Jones commanding 8-figure paydays for fights he might not even be physically capable of performing at an elite level becomes a massive financial risk that could backfire spectacularly. Check this out because it reveals something crucial about combat sports promotion that most fans never consider. The most financially successful cards aren't always the ones with the biggest names. They're the ones that deliver unexpected moments and create new stars. Think about some of the most memorable UFC events in recent history. Half of them became legendary not because of the main event everyone expected to be great, but because of the undercard fights that nobody saw coming. The UFC might be deliberately constructing this White House card to create those lightning-in-a-bottle moments that generate more long-term value than one super fight ever could. And here's something that's going to sound controversial, but makes perfect sense when you really think about it. Jon Jones versus Alex Pereira might actually be a terrible fight for both fighters' legacies. If Jones wins by wrestling Pereira into submission, it diminishes Pereira's aura as this unstoppable knockout artist. If Pereira somehow catches Jones and knocks him out, it's the final nail in the coffin for a guy whose career is already ending on a questionable note. Sometimes the anticipation of a fight is actually more valuable than the fight itself, and smart promoters understand when to let that anticipation simmer rather than risk destroying it with reality. But there's another layer to this that nobody's talking about, and it has to do with how the UFC protects its biggest assets. Jon Jones has generated hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue over his career, and his brand value extends far beyond just fighting. He's got endorsement deals, media appearances, and potential opportunities outside of active competition that could be worth more than any single fight purse. Risking that entire business empire on one fight against a dangerous striker when his body is already breaking down isn't just bad for Jones. It's bad business for everyone involved in his career. Here's what's really wild about the Alex Pereira situation specifically. This guy has only been in the UFC for a few years, but he's already changed how entire divisions approach striking exchanges. Fighters are literally altering their game plans and training camps based on the possibility that they might eventually face him. That level of influence on the sport's tactical evolution is something we usually only see from generational talents who have been dominant for decades. Pereira is compressing that timeline and having immediate, massive impact on multiple weight classes simultaneously. And speaking of impact, let me tell you about something that's happening behind the scenes that explains why the heavyweight division feels so chaotic right now. The UFC is dealing with a perfect storm of circumstances that's forcing them to make decisions they probably didn't want to make. You've got an aging champion with health issues, an interim champion who deserves a unification bout, a rising superstar who wants to make history, and a fan base that's demanding specific matchups that might not be realistic given all the constraints. Managing all of these competing interests while trying to maximize revenue and maintain competitive integrity is like solving a Rubik's Cube blindfolded. But here's the kicker that changes how you should think about this entire situation. The White House card might actually be more historically significant than any superfight could ever be. We're potentially witnessing the first three-division champion in UFC history, which is something that would be remembered and discussed decades from now. Jon Jones versus Alex Pereira would be a massive fight, but it would also just be another heavyweight title fight in the long history of heavyweight title fights. What Pereira is attempting to accomplish transcends normal championship achievements and enters the realm of genuine sporting immortality. Now check this out, because it reveals something about fan psychology that promoters absolutely understand and exploit. The fights that generate the most discussion and controversy are often the ones that don't happen, not the ones that do. Think about how much content, debate, and engagement has been generated by the absence of Jones versus Pereira compared to fights that actually took place and were forgotten within weeks. Sometimes the most valuable thing a promoter can do is create scarcity and demand for something, then deliver it at exactly the right moment for maximum impact. And here's something that's going to blow your mind about the business side of all this. The UFC might actually make more money by spreading these super fights across multiple events rather than stacking everything on one card. A Jones-Pereira fight could headline its own pay-per-view and potentially break buy-rate records. By keeping it separate from the White House event, they're essentially creating two massive revenue opportunities instead of one. It's the difference between having one incredible weekend and having multiple incredible weekends that extend the earning potential across a longer period.